Hi everyone, and welcome to Principles of Economics. This course is about how the economy works and the basic ways to explain it. So how does the economy work? There is no single answer to this question, and it's difficult to answer it because the economy consists of many moving parts. And that's hundreds of governments and millions of firms and billions of individuals and households. And they all have different goals and face different constraints, right? And as a result of the interaction of these goals and constraints, we have a $100 trillion enormous entity, which we call the global economy. And knowing the entire global economy is definitely not possible. However, it's our job to think about how some of its many moving parts work individually and how they interact to produce this enormous value for the world. So some of the questions we address as economists are, for example, how did we end up the way we do? And what made this generation live better or worse than previous generations? So for example, the average person now in most countries across the globe lives much better than their predecessors in monetary terms. However, while the world was getting richer, it also became dirtier and more unequal and politically more divisive than a generation ago. And explaining what led to those economic, environmental, and political changes is part of our job as economists. So there are millions of individual firms and hundreds of governments behind the process of economic growth. And we want to know how they make choices, and what are their guiding principles of action. Why did they make certain decision? And of course, we'll never know if each of them made the right decision for themselves, but we can think about some common traits behind individual actions. And that's why we will often talk about a typical or a representative firm and or individuals. However, taken separately, the decisions of firms and individuals rarely make a difference to anyone, right? They start making a difference when individuals meet each other and meet firms, and they start interacting. And those places where they interact are often called markets. And we want to know what guides marketplace interactions. There are certain rules of engagement that determine the outcomes from the interactions between the people, between people and firms, and between private agents and governments, right? And those rules also shape the outcomes of the interactions. That's why we want to know how changing the rules of the game changes the outcome from these interactions, right? And sometimes we want to know what happens when governments change the rules of those games. So governments do step in sometimes because the outcome of the private interactions are not always desirable. And sometimes governments don't change the rules of the game, even if such a change of those rules would be desirable. And our job as economists is to think about how government interventions and how those interventions make things better or worse for economic agents. Which brings me to the last big question we address as economists. How can governments do more to improve the way people live? The answer to this question is not only in the economics domain. We need to think how the economy interacts with the environment and what the social consequences of those interactions are. So these are the big questions, and what's our approach to tackling the big problems we outline above? We'll normally use three basic steps. So each week we'll identify a big issue that society is confronting now or has faced in our past. And we do that to give you an immediate link between what you study and the real world. Then we'll develop a basic theory to explain what we see in the real world. And finally, equipped with the theory, we'll go back to the facts and ask the question, is the theory still relevant today? Is it any good, or it needs to be adjusted to explain the changes in the real world that we see? So there are numerous advantages of what we do in this module over how economics was done at the A levels and in the UK and in high schools across the globe. And I believe the crucial advantage is that you guys get to operate in exactly the same way professional economists do, right? We see a problem, we look for an explanation, and we test our explanation against real-world data. And sometimes we also offer policy solutions to help solve the problem that we started with. And that's why modern teaching of principles of economics is so important for you to get how, not only how the economy works, but also how economists work on a daily basis. So how are we going to go about it then? First, you watch the weekly videos at home before the lecture. And the videos outline the basics of what we're doing and what we're going to talk about during the lecture and the rest of the week. And the weekly videos come in with slides, and you can use those slides as talking points, not as reading, just as talking points. After you watch the videos and go over the slides, you need to do a quiz. And that weekly quiz is important because it gives you 1% of your final mark. We included quizzes to the weekly videos to make sure you watch them and are ready for the rest of the week. You could also read the textbook chapter before attempting the weekly quiz if you need some extra time to digest the material. So after each live lecture, there comes a very important part of the week, the weekly homework. Right? So together with the weekly quiz, the weekly homework forms a significant part of your final mark in this course. So start early and don't miss the deadline. There's many issues that you face if you miss the deadline. The solutions to the more difficult parts of the homework will come on the following seminar. And during those seminars, you'll have the chance to ask additional questions, reflect on what you learned during the week, and hopefully gear your new powers to solve some important societal problems. Right? So the seminar closes the week off, after which you'll be able to watch the new weekly videos. And that's the plan. Where can you find the weekly videos, the class presentations, and the textbook chapters, and the seminar materials, and the quizzes and the homeworks? Everything is on our learning management system, which is Moodle. And if you have not done it, now is the time to log into Moodle for the Principles course and have a look around. When you get familiar with the Moodle environment, I strongly suggest that you go and create a student account at the Core Econ platform. This is where your textbook is located. One of the great things about Core Econ textbook is that it's free of charge and it's 100% online. And you have an app, so you can access the text from your phone. So if you prefer, you can also use the app instead of the desktop version. And feel free to use the mobile reading and learning app or the Kindle version of the app as well. So many of you, of course, perhaps all of you are interested in how you will be assessed. And this is the structure of assessment this year. First, each week you'll get about 1% from answering a few simple, basic questions about the videos you watched in the accompanying lecture presentations. And some of these questions will come from the textbook material as well. So every week, weekly quiz will be marked. Then you'll also submit a weekly homework. And the goal of these homeworks is to make you work harder to master the material and dig deeper into the more applied nature of the economic models that we discuss in class. Note, however, that not all of these homeworks you submit are going to be marked. Now, out of the planned 9 or 10 homeworks this term, only 2 will be picked at random for marking. This will be the case next term as well. So out of the 18-20 homeworks you submit, only 4 will be marked altogether for the entire module. This means that if it's marked, you get a maximum of 5% towards your final grade from that homework. You'll also not know in advance if the homework will be marked or not. And this is to give you an incentive to submit all the planned 9 or 10 homeworks for the term. And there's another reason we give you these homeworks. You will face familiar problems on the midterm and the final exam. And please remember what I told you during the induction week, right? Although your first year academic performance doesn't matter for your degree classification, it is crucial in many other ways. And importantly, it builds studying habits for the second year and inertia for the second year, which will all already play a role in your degree classification. So remember, your academic performance, your grades, are highly inertial. If you start weak, it will be hard to reverse that trend. And if you start strong, it's going to be easier to keep the momentum going forward. So please, as a person who's been there, I advise you, don't slack, start strong, start right away, work hard, work regularly, and keep your head down for the rest of the term. Because sooner than later, you will need that momentum. And of course, your lecturers and seminar leaders will be there for you in every step of the way during our office and feedback hours. So, what are the topics we'll discuss this term? In week 1, we'll examine how the global economy looks like today and how we got here. We'll dig into a brief history of the world from an economic standpoint. In week 2, we'll have a closer look at what determines technological progress, because technological progress is so important to understand long-term economic growth. In week 3, we'll open the black box of decision making. We'll get familiar with what makes people tick and why and how they make decisions. We'll understand their incentives and constraints and determine what's best for them. But then we'll stop analyzing the individual as a lonely animal sitting on the edge of the forest and exchanging nuts for berries with other human beings. This is not how the economy works. And all actions we take are happening in an environment where others do the best they can as well, right? So we'll discuss how to determine what's best for us, given what's best for others. And this question will be the key to understand the fourth weekly topic. In week 5, we'll see that human interaction happens in an environment shaped by incentives and constraints imposed by others on us. And there are these rules of the game shaping human interactions. And we'll analyze how changing the rules of the game changes the outcome from those social interactions. We'll see that the same people with the same goals and value systems will achieve vastly different economic outcomes depending on how the rules of the game are structured around them. That will have cross-country implications. That will give you some insight into explaining why some countries are rich and others are poor, even though the people in those countries are not that different after all. In the second part of the term, we'll bring in the firm. We'll look in the firm from 2 vantage points. On the one hand, the firm is a place where 3 types of economic agents meet, right? The owners, the managers, and the employees. And the firm is a place in which these 3 types of agents interact. And like we'll see, those interactions are shaped by constraints that each one of those agents has. So unlike in a traditional A-level economics class, we'll look into what happens within the firm. On the other hand, however, firms don't exist only to provide a platform for social conflict between the owners and managers and employees. They primarily exist to make a profit, right? Which firms generate on the marketplace. So we'll talk about that, what markets are and how they shape the profits the firms make, and potentially how they shape interactions between the firms and the consumers. And as you can see, the first term of this one-year module will be more about individual decision making. So you will go for a bird's eye view of important markets such as the labor market and the financial markets in the second term, in the spring term. Without the proper functioning in those markets, the economy will not be able to grow. But sometimes, even if the market participants do the best they can, the markets will generate certain failures. We'll study those failures and see why they lead to socially inferior outcomes. This will open the floor for a limited but vital policy intervention in areas which, if left on their own, will lower the quality of our lives. And we'll close the second term with special topics such as technological progress, inequality, and also the environment. And those topics will be a primer on a whole lot of third-year special modules at Royal Holloway Economics. So here's where you can find me this term. I work in Horton Building, office 213, which is located on the ground floor. You can send me an email anytime. However, please note that I will reply to those emails during my feedback and office hours. You can check out what am I currently working on outside of the classroom on my personal website, and check out my additional professional interests on Twitter or LinkedIn. And in the spring, you will have different lecturers who will tell you more about how to get in touch with them. And last but not least, a crucial part of your teaching team are the seminar leaders, which we'll sometimes call teaching assistants or TAs. We'll determine the TA team soon, and we'll post their contacts on Moodle. So basically, everything is on Moodle for you. I very much look forward to be working with you this term. Now go and see the weekly videos. Thanks. See you next week. Bye.